Okay, so you want to run a medieval brothel. It is the 15th century, and you are standing on the south bank of the Thames, looking across the water at London. The city is close enough to supply customers, but far enough away that its officers do not control the street beneath your feet. This is Southwark, within the jurisdiction of the Bishop of Winchester. Around you are inns, cookshops, breweries, rented rooms, landing places, entertainment houses, and the regulated establishments known as stews. Some customers arrive by boat. Others come across London Bridge. Sailors, servants, craftsmen, merchants, clerks, and travelers all pass through a district built around people who have money tonight and may be gone tomorrow. You do not simply rent any convenient house and begin trading. The valuable thing is not the bed or the sign outside. It is the right to operate in a place where prostitution is tolerated. Inside the City of London, authorities have spent years pushing brothels out, shutting them down, or prosecuting the people connected with them. Here in Southwark, the trade is contained within a different jurisdiction. The bishop's officials permit the stews, collect rent, issue rules, and impose fines. That contradiction is your opening. The same Christian society that condemns prostitution has created a district where it can be watched, regulated, and charged rent. At first, the business looks simple. You hold a house. Women work from its rooms. Customers pay for access. You collect your share, cover the rent, and keep what remains. But the surviving Southwark regulations point toward a stranger business model. The most reliable income may not come from taking a percentage of every sexual transaction. It comes from controlling the rooms. That changes the question. You are not merely selling sex to customers. You are renting scarce, legally tolerated space to women who sell sex, while the bishop rents the tolerated district to people like you. The property is layered. So is the profit. To enter this business, you need a place among the licensed stews and acceptance as a stewholder, the operator responsible for the establishment. You are not buying a modern license that belongs to you forever. Your position depends on continued recognition by the local authority, payment of rent, and obedience to the ordinances governing the district. The building itself need not be magnificent. What matters is location and capacity. A narrow frontage can lead into a common room with several chambers behind or above it. Each chamber needs a bed, bedding, some storage, and enough privacy to be sold repeatedly. Candles or rushlights cost money. Fuel costs money. Linen wears out. Doors, locks, shutters, and bedsteads require repair. Those are ordinary expenses. They do not decide the business. The decisive asset is that each chamber stands inside the tolerated zone. A similar room on the wrong street may attract prosecution instead of customers. Say your establishment has 6 working chambers. That is large enough to produce steady rent, but still small enough to supervise without turning the house into an institution of its own. The women using those rooms may stay for different lengths of time. Some remain attached to the establishment. Others move between houses or leave the district. Their reasons for entering the trade range from immediate poverty and weak employment prospects to coercion, abandonment, migration, or pressure from people who control their housing and debts. The word worker does not by itself tell you how free any particular woman is. That matters because your profit depends on how much control you can exercise over her without violating rules, provoking intervention, or causing her to leave. Southwark's ordinance tradition contains dozens of regulations for stewholders. Among the best known are limits intended to prevent the keeper from turning the house into a private prison. A woman was not supposed to be detained against her will. Stewholders were not supposed to beat the women. Lending and debt were restricted. Room charges were limited, with a figure of 14 pence per week appearing in the regulations associated with the stews. 14 pence sounds trivial until you place it beside contemporary wages. A London laborer might earn roughly 4 or 5 pence for a day's work when employed. A skilled building craftsman might earn around 6 pence. One room at 14 pence per week therefore brings you something like 2 or 3 days of a skilled man's wages. 6 occupied rooms, 84 pence per week. That is 7 shillings before you have taken anything from food, drink, or the transactions happening behind the doors. And it arrives whether a woman has had a profitable week or not. This is the first economic mechanism that really matters. The woman's income rises and falls with the number of customers she receives. Your room charge is fixed. A rainy evening, a religious closure, illness, or a quiet market reduces her takings first. Unless she leaves or cannot pay at all, the room still earns money for you. Now, follow the money through a representative evening. There is no complete surviving account book that gives us the customers, prices, and expenses of one 15th-century Southwark stew night by night. So take a plausible establishment at the scale we have chosen, 6 women using 6 rooms, with charges kept within the known regulatory structure. Suppose a customer pays 4 pence for a visit. That is not a universal Southwark tariff. It is a working value for understanding the scale, less than a skilled craftsman might earn in a day, but still a meaningful purchase for an ordinary wage earner. On a reasonably busy evening, suppose each woman receives 2 customers. The customers together pay 48 pence, or 4 shillings. That is the gross value of the sexual services sold in the house. It is not automatically your revenue. If the women collect the service payments and owe you a fixed room charge, most of those 48 pence pass directly between customer and woman. Your 6-room rents, spread across the operating week, are worth roughly 12 to 14 pence for that night, depending on how many days the house is permitted to trade. The entire house may host 4 shillings worth of transactions while your direct claim is only about 1 shilling. Sales inside a building are not the same as the building owner's income. From the women's side, the same night looks different. A woman receiving 2 customers at 4 pence each collects 8 pence. Her share for that evening is larger than the daily wage of many skilled workers. That is one reason prostitution could attract women whose other paid opportunities were badly rewarded. But 8 pence is not what she keeps over time. She must cover the room. She must eat. She needs clothing, washing, candles, and replacements for personal belongings. There are nights with 1 customer and nights with none. If she is sick, the room charge does not become sympathetic. If she owes money elsewhere, earnings may be claimed before she can use them. A busy night can produce a high daily income and still leave very little security. This is where debt becomes dangerous. You can advance money for clothing, bedding, food, or an old obligation. Once a woman owes you, her future work appears to secure the loan. The arithmetic is tempting. If she earns several pence per customer, a modest advance looks recoverable. But every charge you add makes departure harder. That is why restrictions on lending and detention matter. They are not abstract morality. They are attempts to stop a landlord from transforming a short debt into control over a person. The rule against beating tells you something similar. Authorities do not prohibit a behavior because nobody has considered doing it. They prohibit it because managerial violence is already recognizable enough to require a rule. The regulation may offer a woman a claim against the keeper. It does not place an officer in every chamber. Your authority inside the house remains substantial. You decide who receives a room, how disputes are handled, whether a customer is admitted, and how aggressively debts are pursued. The worker may be legally free to leave while economically unable to do so without losing her lodging, income, clothes, or access to the district. Freedom written into an ordinance and freedom carried in a purse are not always the same thing. You also have to decide what else the house sells. A modern operator would immediately see the obvious possibilities: ale, wine, food, bathing, overnight lodging, and marked up supplies. A customer waiting for a room can drink. A woman living on the premises must eat. Every captive need can become another charge. Southwark's regulations complicate that strategy. The rule system associated with the stews restricted the keeper's ability to sell provisions directly to the women. The economic purpose is easy to see. If you control the room, the food, the fuel, the drink, and the credit, you can make the worker owe money before she has received her first customer. Separating lodging from provisions limits that power. It also shifts spending into the surrounding district. The cookshop sells the meal. The brewer supplies the ale. A nearby lodging house takes the traveler who remains overnight. Boatmen earn from the journey across the river. The stew attracts the customer, but much of his purse leaks into neighboring businesses. So the brothel's importance to Southwark is larger than the stewholder's own account. Your establishment generates foot traffic. A man arriving from London may pay a halfpenny or penny for transport, buy food, drink ale, pay for a sexual service, and perhaps take a bed elsewhere. One visit supports several separate trades. The local authority does not need to seize every coin directly. It can collect rent from valuable properties inside a district made busy by the trade. That is why the bishop's position is so profitable. He does not need to negotiate with every customer or collect a percentage from every woman. He holds the jurisdiction. The stewholder pays for the house and the tolerated location. The stewholder then collects from the rooms. The women collect from the customers. Each level takes money from the level below while passing much of the immediate commercial risk downward. The customer risks being robbed, assaulted, exposed, or prosecuted under rules governing who may enter. The woman risks an empty room, violence, disease, pregnancy, social exclusion, and pressure from the keeper. You risk unpaid room charges, disorder, fines, damage to the house, and loss of your operating position. The bishop risks scandal and failure of public order, but his income is the least dependent on the success of any single encounter. That is what owning the jurisdiction does. Now calculate your week. 6 rooms at 14 pence each produce 7 shillings in gross room income. Assume the house operates through most of the week, but observes required closures on Sundays and important holy days. You still owe your own property rent, whether calculated weekly, quarterly, or annually. You need a servant or porter to manage the door, carry messages, clean common areas, and respond when a customer becomes violent. You replace fuel, light, bedding, locks, and damaged furniture. Take a representative weekly budget. From 7 shillings in room income, perhaps 2 shillings are absorbed by the rent and dues attached to the premises. Another shilling goes toward household labor and supervision. Fuel, light, laundry, repairs, and replacement bedding consume roughly another shilling. Set aside several pence for expected fines, collection failures, and vacant rooms. That leaves something in the neighborhood of 2.5 to 3 shillings in a normal week. Spread across 6 legal trading nights, your return is about 5 or 6 pence per night. On a busy night, with all 6 rooms occupied and perhaps 4 shillings as passing from customers to women, your personal profit may still be only the equivalent of a skilled craftsman's daily wage. That sounds surprisingly small. But you did not perform the 12 services that generated the 4 shillings. You supplied the controlled space. The return becomes attractive through repetition. 3 shillings per week is roughly half a pound every month. Maintain that performance for much of the year, and the business can produce several pounds after routine operating costs. That is meaningful money in 15th century London, especially if you operate more than one's house, sublet rooms, or combine the stew with other property income. The model also reveals where the temptation to exploit enters. If the legal room charge produces only a modest profit, every forbidden or disputed extra charge looks useful. Charge for food. Advance money for clothing. Add interest to a debt. Take a portion of service payments. Demand payment during a closure. Keep a woman from leaving until an account is settled. A few extra pence from each worker can double your margin more easily than finding dozens of new customers. The most profitable abuse may not be dramatic. It can be a ledger that never quite reaches zero. Suppose one woman receives an advance of 2 shillings for clothing and food. In a good week, she earns 4 or 5 shillings from customers. On paper, she can repay you quickly. But she also owes 14 pence for the room, must pay for meals, and loses income on closed or quiet days. Add another necessity before the first debt disappears, and the obligation rolls forward. From your perspective, the debt keeps the room occupied by someone who must continue earning. From hers, the room has become both workplace and creditor. The regulations try to prevent that relationship from becoming unlimited. They do not remove the imbalance that creates it. Your other major task is controlling the door. Not every customer is equally valuable. A sober customer with money pays and leaves. A drunken customer may consume time, damage property, refuse payment, attack a woman, or draw officers to the house. A wealthy man can spend more, but he can also possess the connections to make his own misconduct your problem. Cash is best. Credit is dangerous. An ordinary craftsman may buy ale on account from someone who knows him. A traveler may arrange lodging and pay later. Sexual services offered on credit are harder to enforce without public exposure. Taking a customer to court means admitting the transaction, identifying the worker, and hoping the jurisdiction recognizes the debt in the form you claim. So most routine business favors immediate payment. A few unpaid pence seem small until you remember your margin. If you expect to keep 5 or 6 pence from the entire night, one customer escaping an 8-pence obligation can erase your profit even when the woman bears most of the direct loss. Violence is more expensive. A broken stool can be replaced. A damaged door can be repaired. An injured worker may lose several days of income and fall behind on her room charge. If the disturbance attracts official attention, you may face a fine. If you develop a reputation for allowing assaults, women may choose another house and take your occupancy with them. That gives you a real incentive to maintain order, even if compassion has nothing to do with it. A porter at the entrance is therefore not decorative. He filters customers, prevents several men from forcing their way into one chamber, and removes those who refuse to leave. You do not need a miniature private army. You need one reliable person who understands when to use force, and when calling an officer will cost more than settling the matter inside. Disease creates a different problem. Medieval people do not understand infection through modern germ theory, but they recognize visible illness and fear contagion. The Southwark rules included concern for women suffering from dangerous or visibly alarming conditions. Exclusion protects customers and the reputation of the district, though it can leave the sick woman without income precisely when she needs support. For you, illness first appears as lost occupancy. An unusable room produces nothing unless another woman takes it. If several workers become ill, income falls while rent on the establishment continues. The same is true of pregnancy. It can reduce work, increase danger, and eventually force a woman to leave the house. You have an economic motive to replace her quickly. She bears the bodily cost. The room merely receives a new occupant. That is the harsh efficiency of a rental model. The property can remain productive by replacing the person. The calendar also interrupts trade. Sundays and important religious days are not ordinary business nights. Rules closing the stews express the same moral compromise that permits them to exist. Prostitution is tolerated, but it must not openly compete with sacred time. For the women, a closure means no customer income. For you, the weekly room charge may continue. That transfers the cost of religious observance downward. The authority closes the market, the keeper still owes rent, and the worker must earn enough on the remaining days to cover a full week of living. This creates predictable crowding around open periods. The evening before a closure can be busier. So can the return to business afterward. Demand has not disappeared. It has been compressed into fewer nights. A 6-room house cannot respond by creating a 7th room after sunset. Once every chamber is occupied, customers must wait, leave, or visit another stew. That makes capacity more important than raising prices. If each room can serve 2 customers in an evening, your house hosts 12 transactions. If demand rises to 18 customers, the women may work faster or receive more visits, but the physical rooms become the bottleneck. You can expand by renting another house, not by making the existing bed infinitely productive. A second establishment doubles potential room income. It also doubles your exposure to rent, fines, disorder, and vacant chambers. Scale helps because one porter, supplier, or trusted manager may serve more than one property. But it also removes you from daily supervision. Now another person controls the door and the accounts. A manager can underreport room payments, hide unofficial charges, take money from the women, or tolerate customers who pay him personally. Medieval bookkeeping does not need a modern profit statement to detect the problem. You know how many rooms exist. You know the weekly charge. You know which rooms were occupied. 6 occupied chambers should yield 84 pence. If only 60 pence reach you, the arithmetic is not mysterious. Someone has not paid, or someone is lying. This is why occupancy records and personal supervision matter more than knowing the exact number of customers. Under a fixed-room model, the women's transactions are their uncertain income. Your core account is simpler. Occupied rooms multiplied by permitted charge, minus what the house costs you. The best night is not necessarily the night with the most customers. It is the night when every room is occupied, everyone pays, nothing is broken, and no official has a reason to issue a fine. The worst ordinary week is not a spectacular disaster. It is several small vacancies. Suppose 2 of your 6 rooms stand empty. Gross weekly room income falls from 7 shillings to 4 shillings and 8 pence. Your own rent barely changes. The porter still needs payment. Fuel and maintenance decline only slightly. The loss of 1/3 of your occupancy can remove most of your profit. That makes worker retention central to the business. You want the women to remain, pay regularly, and avoid attracting enforcement. Yet the same rules that recognize their right to leave limit your easiest method of retaining them: coercion. A competent stewholder therefore offers something of real value: a known location, a door guarded against violent customers, a room within the tolerated district, access to the foot traffic coming from London, perhaps help dealing with officers and disputes. If another house is safer, cleaner, or less aggressive about debt, women have a reason to move there. Even in a deeply unequal market, pure brutality can be bad property management. But competition is restricted. The number of tolerated establishments is limited by geography and authority. A woman cannot simply rent any London chamber and expect the same protection from prosecution. Her legal market access is tied to landlords like you. The regulation that constrains your power also creates it. This is the second major economic mechanism. By confining the trade, authorities make prostitution easier to police. They also increase the value of approved rooms. Scarcity turns regulation into rent. The bishop benefits from that scarcity without needing to approve of the activity in moral terms. His officers can say that prostitution is being contained, not encouraged. Disorder can be punished. Unauthorized houses can be suppressed. The tolerated stews can be charged for the privilege of remaining visible. The result is not hypocrisy in the simple sense of saying one thing and doing another. It is a governing arrangement. The authorities believe the trade will continue somewhere. They prefer it concentrated where it can be watched. Once concentrated, it becomes taxable property. Once it produces rent, eliminating it carries a fiscal cost. So the bishop is landlord, regulator, and moral authority at the same time. A fine demonstrates the arrangement perfectly. If you break an ordinance, the authority punishes the violation. But the money does not leave the system. It travels upward. The offense becomes revenue for the institution responsible for preventing it. This does not mean officials want endless disorder. Too much violence or public scandal threatens the district itself. But occasional enforcement proves control and produces income. Your task is to remain profitable without becoming the example used to reassure everyone that the rules still matter. Policy is the one risk you cannot repair with a new lock. Your right to operate exists because the jurisdiction continues to tolerate the stews. A change in political or religious policy can destroy the value of the location without damaging the building at all. Later, in the 16th century, official toleration will retreat. In 1546, Henry VIII will order the Southwark stews closed. Across parts of Europe, Reformation governments will also abolish municipal and licensed brothels that late medieval authorities had once defended as manageable institutions. For a 15th century operator, that future is not yet fixed. But temporary suppressions, changing enforcement, and public scandal already show that tolerated does not mean secure. You own furniture. You may hold a lease. You do not own the policy that makes the rooms valuable. So how much does your medieval brothel make each night? In our representative 6-room Southwark house, a busy evening may contain roughly 4 shillings in payments for sexual services. Most of that belongs first to the women who performed the work, though food, clothing, rent, debt, and coercive demands may take much of it away afterward. Your room income for the night is closer to 1 shilling. After allocating property rent, labor, fuel, bedding, repairs, vacant rooms, and expected fines, you may keep 5 or 6 pence in a normal night. A particularly efficient house could keep more. A week with vacant rooms or one expensive disturbance could leave almost nothing. That is not fabulous wealth from one building, but it is a return comparable to a skilled daily wage, earned from holding space rather than for performing the services sold inside it. Operate steadily, Keep every chamber occupied, avoid fines, and add more properties, and the income becomes substantial. The strongest business is not the house that extracts the largest sum from each customer. It is the house that keeps regulated rooms occupied week after week. The women still bear the most volatile part of the economy. They need customers. They face the violence. They face illness, pregnancy, stigma, and the possibility that debt will become control. You collect a fixed charge from their access to the market. Above you, the bishop does the same thing on a larger scale. He does not sell the service. He controls the place where it can legally be sold. You began the night looking across the Thames at London, imagining that the money was behind the chamber doors. Some of it is, but the most dependable profit never required counting customers. The customer pays the woman. The woman pays the house. The house pays the jurisdiction. In medieval Southwark, the safest money belonged to whoever controlled the room.